What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the vlog. For those that are new here, my name is Eric, and this is my 2006 BMW M5 with the V10 engine. And in today's video, we were supposed to be installing a full straight pipe exhaust to make this thing scream, but instead we're actually going to be installing this new engine over here that I have on this pallet. Let me go ahead and explain. So for those of you that didn't see the last video, we actually spent a lot of time in the interior, and we got our new dash in, we got our new steering wheel, and we fixed a ton of stuff around the car, including the trim right here for the door seal and all these small things that we needed to do to get this thing running. We also worked on the engine, replaced some of the Vanos solenoids, and we cleaned the injectors, and everything was running really good. We had no issues. After the last video we did on the M5, I drove it for a few days before we started to develop a knock. So once I heard that knock, I immediately drove back to the shop, parked it in here, and started trying to diagnose what was going on. I wasn't filming it. I was just trying to get to the bottom of what that sound was. And unfortunately, it just continued to get worse and worse and worse until the point it's at now. So let me go ahead and start this thing up and let you guys hear this massive engine knock that we have. That's very concerning and definitely sounds like we have a blown motor. So let's get this thing started up and let you guys hear it. So as Matt Armstrong would say, engine very bad. And that is definitely 100% true. We definitely spun another bearing, those new bearings that we put in the bottom of this engine, and it is absolutely spun another bearing and is not going to work anymore. These engines are basically non-rebuildable because of the coating on the inside of the cylinders. As soon as you have something like that happen, it's more or less not worth it to do anything to these engines and really just get a new one. So we went ahead and picked this one up on eBay from Auto Foreign Parts. They have a store on there where they sell a lot of European BMW, Audi, Porsche parts. So we went ahead and picked this up from them. I haven't even opened it up yet. So let's go ahead and start unpackaging our new used engine. All right, guys, we got this thing unpackaged, and what a massive engine. When you see it outside of the car, this thing is freaking huge. So it's such a big engine with all the accessories and everything like that. You can tell that it doesn't have headers. That's the one thing that's missing right here on this side is the exhaust header, and it's missing on this side. Up here, we have the electrical connectors that basically go all into the ECU box in the corner and everything like that. So what I'm going to be doing is basically studying this pulled out engine and figure out all the things that are disconnected from this and disconnect the same things in our engine bay for us to pull the engine. So pretty much looking at it, we have some we have some oil lines up here in the front. We have some coolant hoses that need to be disconnected, some vacuum lines that come off the intake manifolds right here, the connections at the back of the intake manifold, the fuel line right here that comes out of the fuel rail that goes to the car needs to be disconnected, and all of our electrical from the ECU box, which is right here. I don't know why they included this as well. I don't need this, and I guess we can just throw that away. But all of these connections need to then go back in there, as well as some of these breather lines on the back, and obviously all of the trans bolts. So right now, my plan is to pull the entire engine with the accessories, the headers, and the transmission out of the front of the M5, and then we will get all the accessories swapped over, and anything we replaced on that engine is in good working condition. We'll swap over here, like injectors, spark plugs, belts, pulleys, everything like that. We'll get the header swapped over, the trans swapped over, and then we'll get this whole assembly put back into the M5. So coming over here to the engine bay, we basically have to disconnect and take apart every single thing we put together in the last few videos. So all of the upper trim needs to come off, the intake manifolds, the intakes, all the coolant needs to get drained, the oil needs to get drained. We need to disconnect the drive shaft, everything like that to pull this thing out. So we're gonna go ahead and start by getting all the accessories taken off, the front bumper taken out, and we'll get to the point where we can pull out the whole front core as one unit. The only issue with that is that I actually want to leave the AC compressor and the condenser in the car. That's basically the pump that's mounted down on this side of the engine and the radiator or condenser that goes in the front for the AC system. The reason I don't want to have to pull that out is because it's charged with compressed Freon, and you actually need a specialized machine to pull that out without just releasing it into the atmosphere. It's really bad for the environment. So my goal is to leave the AC system complete and not have anywhere that we have to disconnect it, and leave it in the car. So that basically means when we take this whole front assembly apart, we're gonna have to leave the AC radiator / condenser somewhere on the ground or off to the side so that we can get this whole thing out the front. We're also going to have to roll the car back a pretty far ways so that we have enough length in front of us to move this thing out. So that's going to be a challenge. And this whole assembly with the trans is super heavy, so I'm really hoping that my engine crane from Harbor Freight can actually lift this up and get it out. We can do a test with the used engine. I need to move that around the shop anyway with our engine crane and just make sure it can pick everything up with no issues. But that's basically the game plan, is disconnect every single thing we can from up here in the engine bay, all of the trim, all the accessories, the whole front end, everything like that. Get it all pulled out, get all the fluids drained, and get ready to prep for pulling this engine out. It is going to be so much work, and honestly, I don't really want to have to go over everything that we already, took off and put back on the car. So I'm probably just going to throw it on the time lapse and just grind away at getting all this stuff out. I know you guys just want to hear this thing scream and run with a straight piped exhaust already, so I won't bore you. The entire removal and reinstall of the engine, we'll probably just do most of it on a time lapse. So I'm going to go ahead and put the camera on the time lapse setting, and I'm going to start taking this thing apart bolt by bolt, nut by nut, labeling as much stuff as I can. And like I said, going back and forth between the used engine and our old engine in here and making sure I'm disconnecting everything that's disconnected on here so that it's ready to pull out. All right, guys, we have done a ton of work over the past few days, and this engine is now basically ready to come out. So we had to switch up our plan a little bit. We were originally trying to lift this engine and trans up over the subframe and out, but that's actually not possible. From all the research I've done and everything I've looked at underneath, we actually have to pull the entire subframe, engine, and transmission out at the exact same time. So right now, the only thing holding this engine and transmission in is the jack underneath and the 6 bolts in the subframe holding the entire assembly up. So basically what we're gonna do is disconnect those 6 bolts once we have the engine crane in place and pull this entire assembly down and out the front. So that should be pretty easy to get this thing out now that we've got it to this point. But I wanna go around the car and show you guys everything that we had to disconnect in order to get it to this point where we are now ready to pull it out. So it does look like there is absolutely a ton of stuff going on here, which is true. So I kind of want to explain everything that's going on inside this engine. So basically we had to take off the entire trim section up above, including this firewall trim right here, which got us access to the back. We took the intake manifolds off and then all of the accessories. So we have this entire wiring harness assembly basically from the ECU box over here pulled over, and then we have all of the hoses on the front and everything wrapped up. We had to get the fuel line off over here as well as the vacuum hoses for the brakes. And then basically there's a hidden coolant line that comes from the back of the engine. That's the only real annoying one. And then the rest of the stuff on the front and top is pretty straightforward, and there's a ton of DIYs online about how to get this stuff out. On the front, we had to take apart the entire front end, the entire crash assembly, and then the rad pack right here we took out. So all the hoses for that, including these oil lines that go from the engine over to this oil cooler, over to this oil filter assembly over here, and then the lines that come out of here back to the oil cooler, as well as the power steering lines on this side. And I tried to take the compressor out like I did on my E92 M3 when I swapped that engine, but the lines on this compressor are just too tight and the space in here is too tight. So I ended up having to put this back on and drain the system of Freon and then take the lines off. So we're gonna be leaving the compressor on here, and we actually took all of the condenser and all the lines and everything off of this side. There's one power steering line on this side, and then the 4 coolant hoses right here and a couple of small ones right here that we had to disconnect. So there's a ton of stuff on this front end. There's actually not a ton underneath, but let's go ahead and show you guys that. So we did have to disconnect everything on the side from the subframe to the suspension. So we disconnected the control arms, the tie rods, the sway bar, and any of the electrical connectors that go from the subframe over to the body, anything like that. So we disconnected everything on both sides so that the subframe with the steering rack and the sway bar can come down together. There's a few things underneath that we had to take off. Obviously the full exhaust had to come out, and then we disconnected the drive shaft from the back of the transmission. Other than that, there's not a ton other than the steering shaft that comes down to the steering rack that's mounted to the subframe. So we had to disconnect that and basically pull all of the heat shields off in order to get access to the drive shaft. But that's about it underneath. The full transmission wiring harness, cooler, and everything will come out as one unit, so we don't really have to worry about that a ton. But we are now ready to take this engine out. So let's go ahead and get the engine crane in here. We'll get the engine leveled, and we'll get the 6 bolts disconnected from the subframe and pull this thing out the front. Let's hope this goes well. All right, guys, I think I got this thing rigged up correctly. Let's hope everything's good. We're gonna go under and slowly start lowering the subframe bolts just to make sure everything is weighted properly up here. We have the adjustments, we can move this back and forth to get the weight right, and we'll slowly lower this thing down and get it out of the car. All right, so we still have 4 of the subframe bolts in. They're just loosened, but this started pulling these tabs up here on top of the engine that are used to pull these engines out. So I'm gonna re-rig the chain the other way, see if that helps it not pull those tabs and actually lifting it up. All right, so we now have all 6 bolts out of the subframe, and we're now ready to pull this thing out. It's all resting on this engine jack right here. So we'll slowly get this lowered down, slowly lowering the jack underneath, and then bringing the whole thing out. So you guys can see this thing is pretty far down and out. We take a look back here. The only thing that kind of got hung up was this wiring harness was clipped in right here, and it is clipped in down there. So I'm going to go underneath, pop it out of those clips, and then this whole thing should be able to come out now. Well guys, that is how you do it. We got the E60 M5 engine and transmission fully out of the car. What a great feeling. Now we just need to swap all of this stuff over to the new engine, which is going to be just as much work as getting this thing out. All right guys, we have run into our first major issue while trying to get all the accessories swapped over from our used motor to our new one. Let me go ahead and explain. So if we take a look at the back of the engine here where the headers are, you can actually see there is a extra sensor right here and underneath right here. These are exhaust gas temperature sensors, and that wiring harness runs up and merges into the main harness, which I've confirmed underneath here, and that actually goes to this blue plug right here. If we come over to our new engine on the wiring harness where the O2 sensors are, there's actually no exhaust gas temperature sensors, and if we come up, that merges in here, and it would run to the same spot, but this one's actually a different color and it's missing those 2 sensor wires right there. So this is actually a different wiring harness because in 2008, they changed the engine wiring harness and the way the ECU controls the engine and got rid of the exhaust gas temperature sensors that are over here. So what that means is in order to make this engine work with our 2006 wiring harness and ECU, and our headers that we have to swap this entire wiring harness from this engine to this engine, which means we have to remove the wiring harness from this one, which is going to be a huge job. So now that is going to be what I'm going to be focused on, is getting the wiring harness swapped from this engine over to this one. So let's go ahead and get started on that. All right, guys, I think I now have every single electrical connector taken off on the new motor. We're doing this one first so that way once we get the old one off, we can just set it right in place and start getting everything connected. But this lower wiring harness that goes all the way underneath the engine was honestly the biggest pain. Everything else is not too bad. It's pretty straightforward. Just injectors, spark plugs, and then a couple other sensors and stuff right here. But as soon as I get this out, we should be able to take this whole entire harness off of the car. All right. Let's set this over here. So that is a harness we are not going to be using. But because we got to this point anyway, we might as well do some stuff while we're here. So after we get the whole harness off of that car, after we get the whole harness off that engine, we're going to be taking the spark plugs out of that engine, putting them in here because they're basically brand new, and the injectors because those are clean. But overall, this motor's in really good shape. It's just a little dusty, but it looks way better than mine. There's not a ton of leaking or anything like that. So it looks good. So let's go ahead and get this thing prepped for the new harness. All right, guys, we got the full wiring harness off this thing and we pulled out the subframe. I had to do that to get access underneath to the wiring that goes under the oil pan. That honestly was the hardest part. Same with the other one. And we took off one header on that side. So I'm going to take off the header on this side, and then we should be done with our old motor for now, and we can focus on the new motor, getting everything on there. It is going to be a huge pain to reinstall that wiring harness. Getting both of those off really sucked. That was honestly probably just as hard as getting the actual engine out. Way more tedious, tons and tons of little clips, and honestly, I broke a ton of them. So we're going to be combining the two wiring harnesses together. Any of the clips that I broke on the one we're going to use, I'll pull off the other one, depin them, and repin them on the old wiring harness. It's just so brittle, and it's honestly, even after taking off the one from our used motor and having practice, I still broke a ton of connectors on here. So that is a big worry when getting this thing onto the car. So let's go ahead and get this last header off this side. Then we can set this aside and strictly start working on the new motor. All right, guys, we got this massive pile of parts, and this is pretty much everything that has got to go back into the M5. So we have our old engine right here with everything taken off of that we need to for the new engine. We have our old wiring harness right here that we need to install on this thing, and that's going to be the next step before I forget where all of these connectors go and where everything was connected to the engine and all of the clips and everything like that. So we're going to hurry and get this old wiring harness put on here. I am probably going to swap a couple of the connectors that were pretty old and brittle from the new engine's wiring harness, and I'll depin those and repin the plugs on there. Since I have all the extra plugs, I might as well use them if some of these are brittle and broken. Most of them are actually in pretty good shape, but there are a couple that cracked on their way off, so I will be replacing those with the ones from the new engine's harness. So let's go ahead and get this engine harness on here, get everything connected up, and then we can start our reassembly of the engine, transmission, and the subframe all together so we can put it back in the M5. All right, guys, we got the entire wiring harness swapped over with zero issues. Everything fit good. The only thing we ran into was this one plug right here for the AC compressor. So I'm going to do some research and see if I can if I should either use the old AC compressor or if I should swap this connector over and depin it and repin it with the new style plug, because it is just a 2-wire signal, and I'm guessing it's just turning it on. It's a signal and a ground. So we'll double check that, but every other plug is now in the engine, and we are ready to get this transmission connected up with the engine and set the whole thing in the subframe before putting it in the M5. So that was a ton of work for today, so I'm going to head home. But thank you guys so much for watching and sticking through this long in the video with how much work this is. I promise it will be worth it at the end. We are going to have an amazing sounding, straight piped V10 M5. All right, guys, that was a ton of work, but we now officially have the new engine connected to the transmission. The header's on, and it is on top of the subframe. So this thing is officially ready to go back in the engine. I'm 99% sure. I made sure to do everything I needed to do before this thing is going in, but I'm gonna double check one last time, and then we're gonna roll this thing in here and try and get it mounted up in place. We need to put in the 6 subframe bolts and the 6 bolts in the trans mount in order for this thing to be securely back in the car. So that's my goal for the rest of the day, is just to get this thing in here and mounted. We'll come back tomorrow and work on connecting all of the different hoses, connectors, electrical plugs, and all of the stuff front to back on this engine that we need to get connected back to the car. So let's go ahead and get this thing rolled in here, and we'll see if I can get this up in place by myself. I'm not sure if I can do it, so if we aren't able to do it, I may have to call in some reinforcements to help me get this thing in here, but let's see if we can do this thing solo. All right, guys, the engine is officially in. We have our 6 subframe bolts in and our 6 trans mount bolts in, and everything lined up. We got the drive shaft lined up with the back of the transmission as it went in, and all the electrical connectors for the trans that are up above it were put into their holders as it was going up. So we are good. I'm gonna go ahead and lower this, and hopefully the engine and trans don't fall out of the car. We are in. That is such a great feeling. Honestly, words cannot describe how good of a feeling that is after how much work this has been to get this engine in here. Just having it in here and knowing that it's actually in place, fully bolted in, and we're gonna be able to connect all the accessories and it's just gonna run. I'm so excited for this. So it's gonna be a lot more work, but we're going to get the rest of the accessories hooked up, and this thing should be ready to go. Let's get this out of here. Oh my gosh, what an awesome feeling. So I will be back tomorrow. That kicked my butt, and we will get all of these accessories plugged in, get this thing test fired, see if we bought a good used motor and everything works. I'm really excited about this. All right, guys, it is a new day, and we are back working on the V10 in the E60 M5. It's mounted in place along with the transmission, and now we have to connect every single accessory to get this thing running. The only thing that's changed since last time is I actually took this oil cooler over to JMac Radiator in Salt Lake City. They were able to clean out the oil cooler and get any debris out of the lines and the oil cooler. This is basically the only part from the oiling system we're going to be keeping, other than the oil filter housing, which obviously will take the oil filter out, and we clean that out really good so that there's nothing in there from the engine blowing up before. But that's one thing you really got to make sure is there's no debris from the previous blown up engine in any of your oiling components. So I looked online at replacing this, and it was about $600 for a new oil cooler. So instead of doing that, I went to the local radiator shop, JMax, and had them clean this thing out with a flush. They actually use some special fluids to clean these oil coolers out, and they let me know that everything was good with the lines and the coolers. So they did that for about $130 with tax, which is so much cheaper than buying a new oil cooler. Everyone online said, oh, you just have to buy a new oil cooler, which I do not think is the case. If you go to a proper shop that can pressurize and test these, like a radiator shop, they know exactly what to do to get these things perfectly clean, and that is what we did. So we're going to be throwing this on along with all the other accessories to get this thing running. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, guys, we have our rad pack completely built up here. I did take this apart piece by piece out of the car because I was trying to leave the AC compressor in, but that's not possible with how wide the motor is. So we ended up putting this back together on the cart we have right here before we throw it in. BMW makes it pretty easy, and you can take this whole assembly out, and if I would have known the compressor couldn't stay in the car, then I just would have done this from the start. So let's go ahead and get this whole thing in the car. All right, guys, we have this thing together and basically looking like a complete car with the engine in and every wire, every hose, everything plugged in. I'm 99% sure of that. So it is now time to add our fluid. So we have our BMW coolant right here, which is concentrated. You have to dilute it with 1 gallon of distilled water. And we have our oil right here, which is a liquid moly 10W60. And we also have our power steering, which is the CHF 11S, which is pretty standard for most BMWs. So we're gonna be adding all of these fluids. We will have to bleed the engine after it gets going and continue to add more coolant and more power steering fluid. So it may squeak in the beginning. The power steering pump might whine a little bit until it gets some fluid inside of it. We will be topping those up. But after we get these fluids in here, I think we are ready to get this thing started. I'm so excited about this. Want to hear this thing. We haven't put the exhaust back on, so that is the only thing underneath the car that's not connected. So it should sound pretty good with no exhaust out the back. So let's go ahead and get these fluids in here and we'll get this thing fired up. All right, so we started filling up the coolant and we ran into a little issue. We found a leak and we fixed it. Let me go ahead and show you guys where it was. So over here on the driver's side, there is 2 coolant hoses, one from the reservoir and then another one, and this one actually goes back into the heater core that is inside of the dash. And there is this little clamp right here, and I did not put that on. I pushed the hose on and I forgot to put the clamp. It was just over here sitting. So it did drip out of here. That was a huge pain in the butt, and I spilled coolant everywhere, and I even got it all over me. So I got a new shirt, and we are going to put everything back and keep filling up the coolant. I think we're good now, and then we're going to add oil, power steering fluid. Let's keep going. All right, guys, we have all of our fluids in here now. We can get rid of the cart. And it is officially time to get this thing started. I'm so nervous and so excited at the same time to fire up this new engine. Right now, we do not have any exhaust on the car, just the header, so it is gonna be so loud, but I think it should sound really good and give us a little sneak peek of what this thing is gonna sound like once we put an exhaust on it. But let's go ahead and get this thing started up, get our first test fire, and see if this new used engine works. All right, fire in the hole. All right, here we go. Let's get this thing started. All right, slightly expected because we have no fuel in the fuel lines. So it is gonna have to build some pressure for a sec. Oh my gosh, that was so loud with the exhaust off. But man, it runs. It actually ran really smooth. And we didn't have any issues underneath. It took a second to prime to get some fuel up in the motor, but that is awesome. I cannot believe this thing runs. Okay, next steps are to get the full exhaust on, front bumper, headlights, and all of the under trays, as well as the upper trim up here. And then this thing will be complete running and driving. I'm so excited about that. We did have an error pop up on the dash for a transmission error. I'm gonna check that out and see what it is. Maybe we left something unplugged, or it could be an issue with the clutch because we did swap over to a new clutch. And I was thinking I would have to do the clutch relearn on the adaptation point. So let me go ahead and get the Autel out and read the codes for that, and then we'll start putting this thing back together for the final time. All right, so we read the codes, and it was a clutch code for the transmission. Because there's a new clutch that was on the back of the engine, we do have to do the clutch relearn sequence, so I have to have the engine at idle speed to do that. So I'm gonna start it up once again and then do the clutch relearn, and then we should be good to go. We had no codes with the engine or anything like that, just obviously the headlight codes and the front parking sensors for not being connected. But we should be good to go once we start this thing up, do the clutch relearn, and then we are good to put everything back together and get this thing on the ground. I'm super excited about this. All right, so we did the clutch relearn. It now says the engine must be turned off, otherwise the values cannot be saved in the next step. So we turned it off with the ignition on, and then it worked. Okay, so now it's saved the values for the clutch, and I think we are good to go. So let's go ahead and get this thing put back together. All right, guys, we've got this thing so close. We got all of our heat shielding on. So the next step before the under trays is actually the exhaust. But I want to make one modification to it before we install it. Let me go ahead and show you guys. So if we come back here, you can see we have our full exhaust right here next to the G80 stock mid-pipe and my M340i old exhaust that I need to get rid of. But we have the M5 exhaust right here, and it has these two massive quad muffler setup things on the back. So we're gonna go ahead and cut those off. Super heavy. These are about 30 pounds each. So we're gonna be taking those off, losing a bunch of weight from the rear, and this thing should sound a lot better. All right, guys, we have our exhaust on after we cut off the mufflers, and we have all the under trays and everything on this car, so it is 100% complete and ready to drive. The only thing we need to do is just run it up to temperature, make sure there's no air pockets in the cooling system, and that all of the fluids stay topped up, which I've checked them a couple of times now, so I think we should be good, but we'll check them one more time, and then we're gonna take this thing out on the road. I'm so excited about this. New engine, muffler delete, and this thing should be running perfect. I'm so excited to finally drive this thing. It feels like it's been so long since we had to take the engine out of this. So it is finally time. Let's go ahead and get this thing started up and let you guys hear it from the back with the new muffler delete. Sounds so good with just the muffler delete. That V10 is so high pitched, it's insane. You guys can kind of hear the throttle going up and down just slightly. It is relearning. We reset all of the adaptations, so it has no idea what is going on. It's gonna have to relearn everything with the engine, the throttle adaptations and everything like that, as well as the clutch that we reset. So this thing definitely needs to get driven. It is time. Let's go ahead and get this thing off the lift and we'll get it on the road. All right, guys, we got the M5 pulled outside. The M3 is in here as well as the M4. We're officially gonna go on our first drive in the M5. I'm just gonna head home tonight, make sure everything works, but tomorrow morning we will be taking the M5 out up one of the Utah canyons so you guys can see this thing, and we'll get some exterior shots of the muffler delete and how insane this V10 sounds. Let's go ahead and hop in the M5 and head home. Man, this thing looks so good outside. It's so dusty, so we'll definitely have to get it washed. But man, it is back together. The hood and bumper fitment is actually way better along with the headlights than it ever was before. I don't know, at one point it probably was taken apart and not put back together perfectly. We now have everything lined up, so all of the gaps and everything are perfect. And this thing now lowered on those lowering springs is looking so good. Let's go ahead and hop in this thing and head home. Man, that startup is so good. No lights, no errors, other than some parking sensor errors, which we will look into soon, but it is running so smooth. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy with this thing. Man, it's driving so good. But I guess, holy crap, the alignment is so far off. That is crazy. All right, we're gonna have to figure something out with that. And we do have one DSC malfunction. All right, we're gonna have to go figure out what that is, but otherwise this thing is driving awesome. All right, so we quickly pulled back into the shop and plugged in the Autel, and we actually have some codes for the steering angle sensor. So because the steering wheel is so far off, it's throwing codes for the stability control and all that kind of stuff. So it's not really gonna hurt anything to drive. The steering wheel is just gonna be way off centered, which we'll have to fix, obviously. But I am gonna drive the car home tonight. We'll come back tomorrow morning, fix the steering wheel, and then we'll head up into one of the canyons. All right, guys, so far so good. Driving great. and everything's good except for the steering wheel being way off, obviously, so we can fix that. But right now the engine is running great. We have no engine lights, no issues. It revs great, shifts great. I'm super excited about this. I'm just gonna keep driving it around, let it relearn, and I will see you guys tomorrow when we take this thing out and we fix the steering wheel. So all these errors are from the steering wheel being off, but man, this thing sounds good. This thing needs an alignment so bad. On top of the steering wheel being definitely off, additionally, it's very vague because the alignment is off. We haven't done the alignment since we changed the lower control arms and the lowering spring, so it definitely is in desperate need of a good alignment either way. All right, guys, we got the steering fixed, and that actually cleared all of the lights on the dash, so we have no more traction control, ABS, or headlight errors, which were all related to the steering angle sensor and it not aligning with where it thought the center should be. So we reset that, and now everything is good to go. Let's go ahead and take this thing out and let you guys hear this V10 rip. Man, this thing sounds so good. Just with the muffler delete, I cannot believe how much you can hear the V10 in this thing. It absolutely rips. All right, let's go ahead and head out and we'll get some shots of this thing outside. Man, that sounds so good. The steering wheel is definitely not perfect, but it's close enough that we can get it adjusted when it gets in alignment. And now we know we're basically right in the middle of the steering rack, which is really good. Otherwise, you end up with one side not being able to turn as far than the other, which is not a good thing. All right, guys, there is an underpass over here that I think this thing is gonna sound sick in. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna push the M button on the steering wheel. That is gonna put us into the 500 horsepower mode and the most aggressive shifting. And this thing sounds so good in this mode. The shifts are insane. So let's go under this underpass up here, let you guys hear the V10. Oh my gosh, that sounds so good. I can't believe how good this thing sounds. Oh my gosh, it sounds so good. Just with the muffler delete. Oh my gosh. It's driving so good. It never drove this good with the old engine, so I'm so much more confident in this car now. It feels completely different. I feel like that other engine was just on the edge of blowing up the entire time I had it. So I'm really glad that it ended up working out, and this engine works great. This right here is one of the reasons I absolutely love Utah, is you can be right next to a neighborhood and 1 second later you're out in the middle of nowhere on a road that you can go basically as fast as you want, and there's not really anybody out here who's gonna care. So let's push that M button and hit it. Woo! Man, this thing needs an alignment. It's a little shaky at high speeds, but it does feel so good. It pulls so smooth through every gear. The transmission feels great. Oh man, this car is awesome. All right, guys, we stopped for some traffic, and look how dead smooth the idle is. We never even had that on our old motor at all, where it would just absolutely just sit perfectly still. And this thing is so quiet at idle, even with the muffler delete. It's crazy how good this motor runs compared to the last one. All right, guys, the M5 has officially made it to the gas station. We're gonna fill this thing up with its new engine, and I'm so excited that this thing is now running so we can start modding it in the next videos coming up. But that is pretty much gonna do it for this one, so thank you guys so much for checking it out. Make sure you guys hit that like button if you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video on the M5, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.
Yeah, testing 1 2 1 2. There's a little something for you, you little bi.